Wanted to welcome everyone today to our event where we're going to hear the presentations of three artists, Natalia Krover, Taizu Park, and Michael Whitney, who all integrate recycled or reused materials as part of their art practice. The first person who's going to speak today is Natalia Krover. She is a working artist and teacher whose artistic output focuses on reclaiming and repurposing materials. She uses meditative hand stitching and mending of vintage linen alongside her industrial sewing machine to stitch and collage layers of translucent single-use plastics which would otherwise contribute to litter pollution. Natalya has been exhibited in shows all over the United States, including the Philadelphia Museum of Art craft show, the Other Art Fair in Brooklyn, and the Visions Art Museum in San Diego. She teaches and lectures extensively, and she will now present her work to us. Thank you, Natalya.
Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me. Let me share my screen. Okay, so thank you, Eric, for inviting me. I am delighted to be a part of the Pratt Earth Action Week. I think recover, renew, and reconnect is just a perfect theme in so many ways. So let me start with a little bit of a background first. After a career in fashion design and a career in wardrobe supervision in the New York City film industry, I started making art as a stay-at-home mom after 9/11. From the beginning, my art making followed a mandate of make do. I make artwork with whatever I have on hand: papers, fabric scraps, candy wrappers, and dryer lint. You know, young kids equals colorful dryer lint. So that's dryer lint there between the sheer fabrics. I think that harkens back to my childhood growing up in the Soviet Union. Make do was really just the way of life. And stitching the art, whether by hand or by machine, was only natural because stitching was just so integral to my previous careers. It just made sense. As you can clearly see in the beginning, my artwork was obviously related to the Russian fairy tales I was reading to my young daughters. But fairly quickly, I transitioned to stitching art inspired by architecture and utilized vintage linens and lace and papers, mostly from my grandmother's stash back in the USSR. I'll tell you about that in a second. I was compelled to explore the imagery of St. Petersburg, Russia, formerly known as Leningrad, USSR, which is where I was born, and now I was able to visit again. These here are well-worn kitchen towels stitched with lace, vintage lace. So on a trip back to Russia in 2012, I returned home with 2 extra suitcases. I helped my aunt and I liberated her closet. She had linens there, family linens from 2 of my grandmothers, and she didn't know what to do with them. I am still working with them. Eventually, I picked up some plastic bags. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but most likely it happened because I needed a certain color and I didn't have a piece of fabric in that color. And the plastic came in that color, and it turned out to be quite easy to stitch. So I suppose it was just inevitable. And thus began my plastic pollution education, which still continues to this day. I just finished a virtual course at Bennington College in Vermont, and I highly recommend anybody take it too. It's taught by Judith Enck. She served as the regional administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under President Obama. This class is available to all, and they have a session starting every 7 weeks or so. Very enlightening and enjoyable as well, despite all the horrific things you learn. So these pictures here represent the main reason for using this material in my art today. Of all the plastic that has ever existed, more than half was produced in the last 15 years. and 91% of it has never been recycled. So yes, that means only 9% of all plastic ever gets recycled. And the devastation that single-use plastic causes on our planet is just mind-boggling. Plastic recycling is broken, and the sad reality is that 12% of it is incinerated and 79% of it is landfilled or released into the environment, and that includes our oceans. The photos you just saw, I found online. It's quite easy, but I have taken to documenting the plastic pollution around me myself. Here in New York City, we have a lovely display above a pedestrian walkway on the Manhattan Bridge. This video is from a couple of years ago, but I'm going to bet it's still there today. And here in the suburban paradise that I call home, it is also inescapable. And because of the pandemic, it feels like it's worse than ever before. There are gloves everywhere. There are masks everywhere. Balloons from graduations that perhaps didn't happen. And the plastic bags, of course. Birds weave nests from it, and I don't know about you, but it makes me very, very sad. This here is a disintegrating robin's nest in my backyard. It has cassette tape flowing out of it. Does anybody even remember using cassette tapes? This one is in the neighborhood pond full of fishing lines left behind by local hobby fishermen. And this one here is a shredded plastic bag, I think. It's fluttering in the branches of a tree in a large park that I take my dog for walks in almost every day. As a matter of fact, here it is months later, and that blue plastic is still there. This video is from this morning's walk. So the very least I can do is collect all that plastic in my own home and use it in my art. That at least keeps it out of the landfill or the incinerator, and both are really bad ideas. So here are my materials dissected. The plastic bags come in a huge variety of colors to choose from for my color palette. The mesh bags do as well. Your onions, lemons, and avocados are quite styling in the supermarket. I dissect the plastic packaging, cutting away the solid color areas, separating the small print and the larger letters, and even the graphics as well. I also use used dryer sheets. They may not be plastic, but they're certainly made from fossil fuels, and they're non-recyclable and non-biodegradable. I paint them or print on them or use as is. They make a nice sheer fabric. I use thread waste for texture, as you will see later. It sort of becomes my own zero waste initiative because I certainly produce plenty of it and I try to use it all. Color catcher sheets are a laundry byproduct. They catch excess dye from the clothes you wash and can become quite colorful themselves. They are non-recyclable, as you may suspect, and are quite fabric-like, so I can stitch them easily. And I can print on them as well. And of course, vintage linens. I'm still working through my grandmother's stash. So here's how I transform the soft single-use plastic that is so abundant around me. Inspired by New York City, I use it as my fabric to construct cityscapes. I use bright, colorful embroidery threads of all kinds to stitch bridges on top of my cityscapes. This is the GWB here. And here's the Manhattan Bridge. This is looking up at it from the Brooklyn side. And this is looking straight at it as if you were driving on it. And as you can see, this is where my love of graffiti shows as I construct my own version from the cut letters from the plastic. I also love fire escapes. I grew up in Queens and lived in 2 apartments with fire escapes. They clearly made an impression on me, as there are no fire escapes like these in St. Petersburg, Russia. Here's a good example of how I put thread waste to work. I think it makes great texture on brick walls, but that's just my opinion. The lettering that the plastic comes in, or that comes on the plastic, comes in a great variety of color: red on white, white on red, green on red, green on white. And I like that I can separate them into different color groups and then use it to construct different color fields for my fire escapes or for my water towers. I also like to look up at the infrastructure of bridges and roadways, especially if I'm stuck in traffic underneath the BQE or something like that. And then I like to construct them in plastic, mylar, and bubble wrap. Here's a close-up of that piece. All those little marks you see on there, those are stitches. And here are two smaller interpretations of the theme. I think this is underneath the Manhattan Bridge as well. And this, I'm quite sure, is underneath the BQE. Urban graffiti is a huge part of my inspiration, and the lettering on the plastic allows me to construct my own version of graffiti, which is kind of a mix of graffiti and those ransom letters from the movies of the 30s and the 40s. So here's some love for you. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So slogans used by young climate activists are another source of inspiration. I admire those young kids. Greta is my hero. I'd love to know if anyone here was in New York and participated in her Fridays for the Future march that happened when she went to speak at the UN, or anywhere else in the world. She certainly participated in many of those. Here's a little close-up of my Greta graffiti. I am now constructing my own 3D towers from discarded CD towers. There's another relic. I cover them with plastic bags and mesh, and I stitch fire escapes on them, and I cover them in my own graffiti. In this case, I use the words from the Declaration of Human Rights. And I made this one light up too. And speaking of fire escapes, I build them on well-worn bed sheets, circa 1950 Soviet Union. Yes, I'm still hearkening back to my grandmother's stash. The fire escapes are, of course, in plastic. This one here is plastic mesh, built on the background of fabric scraps. And here's a close-up. Fire escapes tend to grow larger over time for me. There's certainly plenty of plastic for them. I had the opportunity to fly one on the front lawn of the Rye Art Center in 2019. Here's some close-ups of it. It was single-use plastic indeed, but clear plastic mostly, several layers. And I stuck some thread nests in there as well. And as you might suspect, it held up quite well to all kinds of weather. It was outside on that front lawn for about 3 months, from January to March. Then I had the opportunity to reuse that fire escape, which I thought was appropriate, when I designed an installation for the Creative Climate Awards exhibition that was put on by the Human Impact Institute. It was displayed at the Taipei Cultural Arts Center on 42nd Street. I had a little alcove for my installation, so it was very hard to get a good photo. So this is a composite, but there were many fire escapes and lots of graffiti. And I found myself needing to add some flora and fauna to that installation, which, by the way, was called Omnipresent Future. So I think there's a bit of an irony in crafting birds from a material that is polluting our environment and contributing to the deaths of thousands of birds as they become entangled in plastic bits or mistaken for food. I was invited to make an installation titled "Speaking of Birds" this past summer at an outdoor sculpture exhibition at the Saunders Farm and Museum in Putnam County, New York. I loved the challenge of making about 120 plastic birds in this gigantic pine tree. I think the whimsical appearance of birds actually bellies the importance of the message and echoes the contradictions people encounter when weighing the convenience with recycling and proper waste disposal. Though making architecture-inspired art is my first love, I am a city girl after all, I often find myself making art inspired by nature, and I'll still make it out of plastic, of course. And I enjoy the irony again of creating nature out of a material that adds to its destruction. And I must say that I thoroughly enjoy the challenge of creating art from trash. I've heard someone say recently that trash is a failure of imagination, and I have to agree with that statement. We need a better solution for our plastic trash problem. It needs to be better than making art with it, because the sad reality is that the plastics industry, along with chemical manufacturers and fossil fuel companies, will not shift to reusable or bio-based products unless local laws require it. The United States has 4% of the world's population, uses 17% of the world's energy, uses 24% of the world's natural resources, and creates 12% of the world's waste. Clearly, a lot of innovation is needed to solve the problems ahead of us. If I may be so bold as to give you all a call to action, there are solutions to plastic pollution, and many of them are detailed in the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which was just introduced in Congress about 2 weeks ago. So please ask your local representatives to support it, and go to breakfreefromplastic.org to learn more about it. And beyondplastics.org also has a lot of information about plastic pollution. It's really quite a treasure trove. For me, I try to educate the general public about plastic pollution problem with my art. It seems to be working, as I'm frequently hired to teach my techniques for sewing with plastic virtually, especially the nature scenes. They're quite beloved. And believe me, I talk about the plastic pollution while I'm teaching my techniques. But even more importantly, I look forward to being able to get back to being a visiting artist in our schools, as the kids are the ones who are really, I believe they're destined to be our heroes. They are the ones who will save our planet, and I'm counting on them. I hope you are too. So thank you for your time, and thank you for letting me be a part of this important conversation.
Thank you, Natalia. Okay, so our next presenter is Michael Whitney. Michael has been creating found object-inspired art since 1994. He studied industrial design at Pratt Institute, followed by working in New York City for 20 years as a designer and fabricator. He built furniture for an array of architects, designers, commercial clients, and personal residences. In addition, he has pursued his own design work. This work has been seen in theater productions, storefront windows, galleries, outdoor sculpture parks, commercial businesses, and home residences all over the East Coast. Everything from clocks made from elevator dials to lamps made from TV antenna, and such objects as 6-foot stars made from wooden ladders and wall mirror made from an antique wooden toilet seat. His intention is not only to engage the viewer in a dialogue about what we all throw away, but why? But he hated seeing all these beautiful things going into the garbage. He has shown at the Lafleur Gallery in the Saratoga Springs Art Center, Spring Street Gallery, Beekman Street Cafe, and the Scarlet 7 Fine Arts Gallery in Troy, New York. And with that, I will introduce Michael.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy that you contacted me and gave me an opportunity to talk about the work that I do. I love making things, and I hope you can see that in the slideshow. I'm going to share my screen and give you a little glimpse of my insanity. So, functional art, I don't even know what it is sometimes. And I feel that from the very beginning, when I was at Pratt, the idea of function was super important to me. The idea that I was creating something that was useful to people, something that was practical, something that was well made, was always something that I strove to do. And I looked into going to design school to further my understanding of how things are made, why things are made, and the design intention, the functional intention. And so as I studied industrial design, I started to realize that we don't really need to make anything else. We have so much on this planet already. And if we could just figure out a way to reuse it and keep it, make it last longer, and sort of buck against this disposable, built-in obsolescence, we might actually solve some of these issues that Natalia was bringing up. The idea that we consume and consume and consume, and it's almost built into the product for it to fall apart and become either single use or limited use. And so I'm a junior industrial design student at Pratt. I have extensive carpentry experience. I love to make things, and I'm studying, and I'm ahead of myself as far as credits go at Pratt. And I was given the idea that, you could do a senior show. You're an undergrad, but maybe you do a senior show. And so I was thinking, I don't even know what to do. I don't want to make any more furniture that's just another piece of furniture. What's the creative aspect? And I'm on a date with this woman, Upper East Side, Manhattan, walking along. And I see this chair, and it's missing a leg. And in the same pile of trash outside of a Mexican restaurant on the Upper East Side, I see the broom completely worn out, as you see it in the picture, not something that could sweep anymore, orange handle. And I, for some reason, picked both of these things up, and I said, I could fix this chair with this broom. And Blair was like, okay. And she really didn't understand, and I didn't really understand what was actually happening. And it took me quite a while to kind of fall into the work that I created out of this moment. It was literally this moment where I realized that I could create something out of the junk, and I could be inspired by something that's broken, not only by how it broke, but what broke on it, and then start to have these conversations with the piece, with the way that I was going to fix it, and with the viewer and the user as to what is happening here. This chair is still useful. It's totally functional. It's missing a leg. I mean, you can't really sit on it, but I thought to myself, if I could just fix this chair, there's two ways I could fix it. I could fix it the way it was made intentionally. The Tone, the original designer, could bend some wood and replace the leg. So that's one way. I could take that effort and make that happen. Or I could exaggerate the idea that it was broken and thrown away and replace it with something that's completely out of the realm of the way people think that you might fix something like this, and start to discuss and start that conversation. And that's what these pieces were. And I created this, and I talked to Blair. I was like, Blair, we got to take this home. The date was over. I didn't have to bring it into the restaurant, and I did have to bring it into the lobby of her building, and then take it home on the cab, when I left. And so it took this. It was the beginning of this commitment that I made to collecting. And I used to joke with, years would go by, and I would joke with people that came to my shows and whatever, friends, and even my mom is like, I'm a hunter and gatherer from a new generation. Like I go off into the streets of New York City, into the dumpsters, into the basements of factories, and I collect this stuff. And I love stuff, and I used to love to collect. And I would collect for a lot of different reasons. I would collect because I had an idea, or I would collect because I loved the thing that was being thrown away. It was like, this is a beautiful object, and somebody gave up on it. And I get it. Believe me, I get it. And when you look at this, it's a simple piece. You know, you look at the next, oh, how come it's not going to the next one? Any idea? Oh, I have to click the picture. So the next thing that I made is like this mirror chair, right? You hang it on the wall. I'm in New York City, and I would think of these ideas, and I would try to, you know, work with all the ideas that I had. And I had this show that I put together based on the things that I found. So I found this chair, it was thrown away. The finish was awful. So I responded and designed based on the way I found it. So I found the chair without a leg and I fixed the leg. I found this chair with a terrible finish. I know why they threw it away. The intricacy of refinishing this chair is not doable for most people, right? They either don't have the skill, it costs too much to repair it. And then how do I fix it? So something like this fell into that realm of, it's not obvious that it was made by an obsessed recycler who loves to make things. It's just a new idea, right? So some of the things that I made, I collected out of the object and this idea, and they just became a new product. And that I got to keep them on the planet. And I got to think about them as something that was not thrown away. And so, you know, like Natalya was saying, she hates seeing all that plastic. And if nothing else, she's keeping it out of the garbage. I kept this chair out of the garbage. And so some of it was like this moment of satisfaction, just a personal thing. And I got to sell it for $75 or $100. Or maybe it was this idea where it started a conversation. Well, where did you come up with that idea? Well, I found the chair. And so this conversation came in to my work again and again from different perspectives. Is he a sculptor? In this case, maybe I am. Is he a designer? In this case, maybe he is. And so things like this is my grill that I grew up in, the grill part, the metal part, rusted, gone, useless. So the whole thing's rendered garbage. And that's fine. I get it. Totally fine. But the shelf is made of redwood. It's not going anywhere. It was kept well enough that the wheels didn't fall off and the metal didn't rust. And so there were parts of it that were still useful. And what could it become? And so I made this, you know, red hot seat, you know, the throne, you know, barbecue grill chair. There's lots of names that come in and become kind of become a little bit of a commentary. But it's also about what's left of this, you know, iconic object that we can keep on the planet and make something else out of it that becomes fun and again starts that conversation. I got into puns for a little while where I was, you know, there's this idea of a ladder back chair. So then I found a ladder, it's perfectly good. But then I found this chair that was missing the back legs and the seat, the back was gone. The caning was still halfway decent. And so I would put these things together and become that sculptor and really get into the functionality of it. Now it's not super comfortable, but it ended up being a talking piece. You know, how do I keep this conversation going? How do I encourage people to just think before you throw it away? Is there another use? Is there something else I can do with this object? This piece here, ball stool, you know, I think what ended up happening is I found a base, top came off, and it became the idea of, could I turn this idea of designing from found objects and in being inspired by found objects, and then I could actually make a product out of it. And I sort of turned it all the way around back into maybe making a mass-produced product that just became this new idea, this new way to sit down, sitting on a ball, creating a new experience, something fun, a little playful. And then, you know, then I turned the table to being a designer again. So the work that I did over so many years was either inspired by something that I found or inspired by an idea that I had to keep something on the planet, like these crutches. Now, you like the idea of an adjustable height stool. I like the idea of an adjustable height stool too. I also like the idea of keeping these crutches out of the garbage. They're made out of Baltic birch. They're going to last forever if you keep them inside. And I made a stool out of them, and I can move it up and down. So I started to talk a little bit about saving something. And then within some of these pieces, it just became this obsession. How can I make this work? I have this idea and I want to make it happen. And so how do I get the angle of the crutches to meld with the seat? How do I get, so it became almost sort of about successfully executing the design and not using a lot of money and material and consuming a lot of things to do it. And so, I didn't replace the rubber feet, even though the rubber feet are dirty and sort of used, and they probably should be replaced. And if somebody wants it in their house, they might want a cleaner. But that wasn't the point of it for me. The point was not to make, in some cases, the point was not to make something refined and perfect. It was to make it functional and continue that conversation. And so then I got into this idea. I'd see these chairs on the street, and somebody threw it away because one of the legs broke, or the finish was bad, or the upholstery was bad, but it was still a good chair. The one on the left is a Danish modern chair, is a very good, but the back leg was broken. The one on the right, the upholstery was still good, the finish was terrible, right? And I found the one on the right with that upholstery on it, on the street, was perfect. I reupholstered the one on the left, and I started to come up with this sculptural obsession of creating these relationships between these chairs that I would find. And I used to joke that I'm dating these chairs until I find the match. And I would sit them next to each other, and if the heights matched or the arms came around at the right thing, the juxtaposition of how the seats worked and forward and backwards. And I got really into that idea for a long time. And so, some of it became, I kept these, the recycling piece of it is not obvious here. But for me, it was, because I know I found both of the chairs. I know I didn't use any new finish. I used stuff from my construction business. I paid somebody to upholster it. So there's that expenditure, but it's a limited expenditure within a product that's completely functional. And I called it Mom and Dad, and my parents liked that, and because they paid for Pratt, they sort of were happy, So there's lots of reasons we do things, right? But I got a little further into this, where I would start to find these chairs and really become like beholden to the way they were originally made, and how can I keep that integrity and use the nail heads, because that's the way Grandpa's chair was made, and Grandma's chair, his arms around her, and he lost a leg in the war, and so she's holding them up. And so I'd be able to come up with these little stories between these two chairs, and I'd execute them out of this found collecting materials kind of obsession that I've obviously had developed by this point. And I got opportunities for shows, and so this was a winter show, and I talked a little bit about commentary of the struggle of the blacks, whites, where are we with it? And so I came up with this warmer together, and I put a black chair with a white chair, and I refined them, and I made them fit together, and then nobody wanted to have the conversation, or everybody wanted to have the conversation. Sometimes it was just my conversation that I was having, and I would get these opportunities to show a piece of work that that helped that conversation have a little humor, or help that conversation have a little clarity, or maybe it was just the impetus to start the conversation, whatever it was. Sometimes it was about something very simple, and sometimes it was a bigger subject. A lot of the things that I found were just beautiful, and I liked them. The base of this chair, the seat was broken. The chair seat, the legs were broken. So I would marry these chairs together and come up with basically a new design from two styles. And then the idea of working with function and questioning a little bit of that functionality storage in a chair is not a typical thing. So this old drawer in a dresser, I didn't save the whole dresser, but I was able to save the one drawer, and that the idea of that pun came back to me over and over and over the years. And making a table out of a door was always something that people talked about. In this case, I used the door exactly as I found it. The hinges are in their exact place. The length of the door is exactly the way, 6'8". And all I did was cut out a miter and create a structural door. And it was based on the piece that I found. And again, brought up that idea of, I have this idea, how do I make it? How do I make it functional? How do I make it aesthetically pleasing? And so when I went to Pratt and studied design, and I was an apprentice as a carpenter, and I questioned industrial design and product development, all of these things played into all of the work that I created over all of the years. And it's just been fun. And sometimes, again, they focus on different aspects. And, things like this became, not so much about the original door, but about the idea. Storage in a table, the aesthetic of a banister that was thrown away because the finish was shot, matching the rusted buckle. Those things sort of fell together for me. I found an entire box of fan blades one time, and I decided that they're a perfect backdrop for clocks. It's a beautiful color. They're brand new. They were in the package. So at some point along the way, I ran out of space, and I had a small shop, and I had to start creating things that were made from smaller things. And then I started to realize that this obsession in upholstery and all these things were actually pretty expensive. And how do I fund it? How do I keep myself, making things? And so clocks were an easy sell. I could sell them for $100 or $75, and I could keep buying clock motors and, rubber feet and things that I needed for my pieces. And some of the things like this, has the 12 in there. So there's subtle relationships to what a clock is, but then it's using a beautiful object that I found. Questioning, the dial of a clock and making somebody think a little bit about what they're actually looking at. I'm looking at a clock and I need to know how to tell time. So I always was playing with that a little bit, that subtlety. Beautiful objects, chrome, it's a perfect object thrown away. A little bit of steel wool and it's ready to be something else. Leaky buckets, reclaimed wood. You think of this sitting on a bucket in the farm, so little things like that, you can actually still carry the bucket. You pick the handle up, you can still kind of carry things in it and walk along. I have these funny ideas and then I just make them happen. And I think that there's this point that I came to making these things where I collect so much stuff. I end up only being able to make, and I don't know how Natalya is her percentage of her use with the plastic, but you end up collecting so many things because you have so many ideas and you really want to make all these things. And I've been really blessed over the years to be able to make and create things and find people to buy them, find people to help me sort of support this habit. So the plumbing, right out of the garbage. And I got into looking into the waste stream as to what is thrown away. And wooden ladders were this just incredible material for me because they're made to last outside. They're always very straight, very clean, not free wood. And I always thought they were beautiful. So I looked into the world for what's being thrown away and tried to come up with something to make with them. So sculptures, heartbeat. And then I started taking the ladders and trying to get back into the functional, making tables, side tables, doing a little bit of the glass, leaving the hardware, responding to the legs and the way that the paint finish was. I left it all alone. And then I started realizing that this material might be good to use just as stock for frames, And then this is actually a reuse of the sculpture that didn't last outside forever and fell apart. And so then I took the sculpture apart and made mirrors. Many different kinds of ladder mirrors have been in many different shows. And I love objects. I love statements. I love things that are nostalgic. So Freightliner, people look at this and they're like, what's this from? I don't remember. Oh, that's a mud flap. That's what it is. And then they get to sort of experience, how would you turn a mud flap into a mirror? That became my challenge. Again, something that was deemed unsafe and replaced in the stream and thrown away with these heaters, these like coil heaters. And so I turned them into mirrors. Toilet seat into a mirror. And just so many things that were thrown away became the backdrop for products that I've been making over the years. And then the last thing I'll say, I think I'm probably running out of time on this a little bit. The idea that some of our waste in the world comes from carelessness. And so this idea that we just want to speed through the moment, or, we're running down. I started collecting gloves. Everywhere I looked, I saw a glove. I ended up with a couple hundred gloves in a few years of people lost their glove in the winter. Snow pile would melt, there'd be a few gloves in it. And so I started collecting them, and as a piece, as 75 gloves on a wall, it becomes this recognition of like, oh my God, that carelessness actually contributed to garbage. And so I started working with that a little bit and doing a few shows of the different gloves that I found. And then there's so much cut wood in my shop, and I started making these wood stories. And so then I wanted the story to stay alive in some of these pieces. And so I would take these pieces and everybody would have a different interpretation of this. This reminds me of my grandmother's frame, that kind of thing. So I worked a lot with these wood stories, I called them, and I just saved the wood. And then the last thing I'll show you as we transition into Taezoo is working with the idea of the way things used to be and the way things are, and this technology. I made a chalkboard on where the screen was, and so now you can hang it on the wall and use it as a chalkboard. I don't actually mean for us to use it as a chalkboard, but I like the idea of thinking about the way we used to interact with information, we used to interact with communicating, and then taking something that was thrown away because every couple of years it gets pitched, the screens get pitched and the technology creates another object, and then just making sure we remember that we're throwing things away and why. And so thanks for letting me talk. I love my work and I love to share it with people. So I appreciate this opportunity, Eric. And I hope I didn't go on too long.
Nope, perfect.
Good.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we have, let's see. Next up we have Taezoo. Taizu Park is a Korean-born, New York-based artist. He is a digital artist whose work explores analog and digital technologies. Park pushes new artistic forms through his unique use of digital code, emphasizing the existent character within an abandoned and forgotten technology. He calls it digital being. Taezoo's digital being has been seen and shown on ABC News, BBC News, ACM SIGGRAPH, Digital Arts Community, ACM SIGGRAPH Asia, World Maker Faire, Computer Human Interaction, Spring Break Art Show, Governor's Island Art Fair, Lower East Side Ecology Center, Made in New York Media Center. Man, you are all over the place. Oh, and the World Trade Center. Okay, so Taezoo's blowing up. So without any further introduction, he's a nice back-to-back with Michael. Michael is very analog, woodworker, and Taezoo is the exact opposite. Take it away, Taezoo.
Yeah, it's really honored to be a part of this conversation and presentation because I'm still learning through this other artists and the artworks from artists. Yeah, I love the opinion about the percentage of the recycling of the plastic is less than 10%. Yeah, I heard about it a lot when I participating kind of communication about the electric waste too. Yeah, everything is landfill and some part of the electronic waste going to third world and it's too toxic to people. They are wearing no gloves or certain equipment. Yeah, they doesn't have, so they kind of exposed by what we made. So and from Michael, yeah, I love the point of view of how you watching the object for a long time and kind of deliver your idea, making new shape of the original piece. Yeah, I love the idea, and I'm really into how combine the digital technology into this old technologies because yeah, I also think the digital technology also can be a big part of our current and future generation. So there are lots of electronic waste appears by the changing the infrastructure from analog to digital. So I'm kind of enjoying and I'm kind of observing what we are doing right now. So based on the idea, I'm trying to make my artwork. Let me share my screen. Okay, share.
While Taezoo is doing this, I wanted to point out that what's sitting behind him are actual things. That's not a photograph. That's Taezoo's hoard of electronic bits and art.
Yeah, this is my kind of life collecting. I love the objects and the machines, mostly machines, because we really focused on the function of the machines. So when we change the infrastructure, the broadcasting infrastructure from analog to digital, lots of analog television was abandoned, which is still working and beautifully working well and functionally. But at the same time, we can find unknown perspective when it happened. Yeah, probably when we moved into new technology like digital technology, yeah, the analog technology is still existing around us, but yeah, we need to find a better way to use both of them wisely. So yeah, here is my website, and you can see my previous and current works based on the idea. Yeah, I came to New York City 2008. It was about 1 year before digital switchover. As I mentioned, the broadcasting system was changed from analog to digital, and lots of analog television was abandoned on the street. Still, yeah, these days I can see lots of bad CRT television on the street where, but that moment I really curious about why we are doing this and why we are kind of addicted by the consumerism. We just probably it's not very long history of the human history about the consumerism, but we are kind of addicted to this generation of human beings. So I try to try to find a new perspective on that. Yeah, I'm going to show you the short video about my first exhibition at Pratt Digital Art Department. Yeah, I found lots of electronic waste on the street, and I tried to start to collect them. And when I do that, yeah, people saw my behavior, and my friends and my professors want to donate their old machines. And at the same time, I really easy to find my art materials on the street. So, and the ARC building, yeah, digital art department was in ARC building, which is gym building underneath. The base area was kind of, yeah, the place previously the digital art department was there. And when they moved to new building, there is kind of storage space in which you can find lots of old technologies. So I have a chance to get some of them. So it becomes like this amount. This is my first exhibition at Digital Art Department, the Pratt Digital Art Gallery. And as you see, lots of electronic waste, including CRT televisions, monitors, and radio and computers. Yeah, this amount is very easy to collect. So I start to look at that and try to combine the digital technology, because I believe something can be happen inside in these abandoned technologies, which we never know. I call it digital being, kind of human being, but it's kind of primitive consciousness we didn't know yet in our digital system. It appears from this untreated, not well-treated devices. So based on the idea, I'm start to do my artwork. Yeah, let me show you this video.
There are very simple digital codes in all electronics such as televisions, speakers, and computers. Not only is the daily output of these electronics incalculable, but also an enormous number of them are thrown away. Unless the memory chips or CPUs of the circuits are broken, they can still operate by command codes inside their bodies. What if the codes are accidentally combining with others, then generating mutant codes when they have physical shocks or make errors among themselves? As digital technology is developing, the interactions among machines increase dramatically and produce more e-waste, therefore raising the possibility. My artwork Digital Being is based on this hypothesis.
Yeah, it sounds like an insane idea, but I wanna talk about it a little bit because whenever I think about the digital technology, it could be possible, yeah, this artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence can made by this characteristic of digital technology. Yeah, deep learning, machine learning can be possible because everything can be binary code. And then it can be either image, sound, or anything. When it digitized as a binary code, then it becomes something, and the metadata can be a source of the deep learning of the AI. Yet that is kind of interesting process to me, because when we digitize something, yeah, even we, the scientists and developers, find how we digitize our consciousness of a human being, then it could be something else, something like being existing in this technology. But I don't think we cannot digitize it. Yeah, I'm keep curious about it. So yeah, anyway, yeah, I'm curious about the consciousness of the machine, at the same time human consciousness. So between them, yeah, and I connect with this, our current situation, the consumerism. So it become like this form of exhibition. And based on this hypothesis, I keep doing my art. Let me show you. Yeah, after this exhibition, I start to participate Makers Fair from 2012 to 2018. I participate. And after my graduation, I don't have big space. I don't have big storage space. I don't have money. So I couldn't keep the amount of the installation in my place. So I have to, right after the show, I have to recycle almost 90% of them. Yeah, I'm really good friend of the janitor in the building. So yeah, he helped me a lot to recycling. And I got to know there is some kind of big recycling center, which becomes later my residence place, the Goanos e-waste warehouse run by Lower East Side Ecology Center. Yeah, I did the residence in there in 2015 and 16. Anyway, yeah, after the first show, 90% of them was recycled and the 10% left over here. So I start to introduce it through this fair, maker fair, because it's the place to share the idea. Like other presenters, I just want to mention our current situation and what can be happen with my insane perspective, and just keep telling about it. And the idea can be trigger other people's idea, and with the kind of sharing and communicating each other through my artwork, we can find better way to develop the direction of the developing technology. That's what I'm keep doing. And 2012, I participate this fair, and I invite Lori Anderson. Yeah, she's avant-garde artist, so I'm really excited to meet her. Yeah, and I invite her, and she came to the place at the first exhibition at Maker Fair. And I also met scientists, the doctor students from Cornell Science Social Information, because they are really into this recycling e-waste. If they think, if they change the notion of the e-waste, then we can reduce the amount of the e-waste, because we are stick on the consumerism too much, and lots of manufacturer company try to sell their new product replace the old product to make some money. Yes, so they asked me to do collaboration. So we did collaboration in 2013 at Cornell University, supported by Intel, the IC chip, the CPU chip manufacturer. After that, we made this installation and introduced this show, this piece in Maker Faire and in a computer-human interaction conference in Toronto. And we got featured because like two other presenters, this way to make art or design, it can be a new way to make. Yeah, in my case, I don't do any sketch to make this installation because I couldn't do that. At the same time, when I make a single piece of my artwork, I don't need to make some detailed sketch. From nothing to make something is previous kind of a way to make something. But when I do collaboration with these researchers from Cornell, yeah, we found out we can make another method for design or to make something. You know, from what we made, we can transform the function or the shape. We can create something else, like Michael just mentioned. So I'm really excited about it because I don't know what is the best way to make the direction of the developing technology well. At the same time, I'm curious about the human consciousness and machine consciousness. At the same time, the way to find way of new design method. So yeah, anyway, this is my kind of journey, and we showed this piece. And when I participated 2014, I just put the electronic waste as a shape of map of Manhattan, and yeah, let children watching it. And the Maker Fair was a family-oriented fair, so lots of children's around there, and the new generation and future generation of this human society, yeah, they need to figure out what is the best way to recycle, or another term. So I just give a question to the new generation, and this new generation, the leader, he keep watching it, and he asked me to touch it. So I think I didn't expect to touch the piece because it can be toxic. It can be it can be it's possible, but I don't want to do that. But these kids really want to do that, and under the parents' observation, I let them do that after 2 p.m. And it turns out, if it's our shape of Manhattan, made by what we made, yeah, this new generation making new shape, yeah. So I just observe and document the moment, and some kids and family made a new shape based on this what exists. So it was really inspirational happening. It's happy accident to me, because I didn't expect, if I just show my work there, it's not gonna be inspirational to me. But when they participate and do something, and it becomes something else. So I'm really happy. I was really happy as an artist who participated this fair. I love this fair a lot, but 2018, yeah, they just shut down because I heard the lack of support. Yeah, anyway, it's sad. So I moved to art scene, and yeah, this is Spring Break Art Show. Yeah, this handsome gentleman is Peter Ginn. He's curator. He invited me show my work there. He curate my show and Katya's show, the next room. And I just drag lots of electronic waste and just spread it there. It took a long time because I do everything by myself, and I don't want to waste other energy to make this happen. And I have to support what I'm doing by myself. So, and physically, my back was really hurt from this point. So I kind of decide make my artwork smaller than the previous installation. But these small pieces can be a part of my big installation in the future, but I'm not sure when it's gonna happen. Yeah, I'm keep making this kind of artwork and try to ask a bunch of questions to the audiences, because I don't know the answer. Just I wanna find the answer with the audiences. Yeah, this is what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm really into new technologies and what is the leftover, the side effect of the new technologies. So I'm kind of exploring every new technologies, and like machine learning and OpenCV, like computer detection, your face, and the face can be information, something like that. I'm into it and try to use it as an art material, then try to find the side effect at the same time, the meaning of the new technology as an art material. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Taezoo. That was great. Thank you very much. At this point, I would invite anyone who has any questions to feel free to offer them up, or any comments? I think I'd like to sort of maybe just add something to Taezoo's work, since I've seen it in person. It's actually all interactive and it has a lot of embedded sensors, and so as you're moving past it or interacting with it, it responds to you. So it's actually quite gestural in its behavior. So in very complex. So if you ever get the chance to see it, it's definitely worth immersing yourself, even in the smallest pieces. Yeah.
Can I mention one more?
Of course.
Yeah, I kind of get learning about the interaction between the machine and human being. I really love the moment people notice the sensor actually triggering the kind of the set it code into it. But the sensor, when it detects the human movement or the, with the sound, my artwork can turns on and do some weird behavior. And people noticed the behavior and got to know, oh, their movement can trigger that behavior. When they find it, yeah, it seems like it's very simple interaction. Like when you go to the restroom, you can see the motion sensor detect you, and yet the flush is running. And yes, yeah, it's very simple interaction. But when I apply this interaction as an art material, then people think about the relationship between human being and the machine. So yeah, I really recommend you can use the way find the notion, new kind of idea about the material, the new technology. It can be really good for your making design or artwork. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalia, there's a question for you. Are all the materials you use from your own household, or do you also retrieve materials from other sources?
So my materials are mostly from my own household, but I do have some well-meaning friends that donate materials to me as well. I try to discourage them because my storage room is overflowing.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, Todd.
Okay. Thank you. I enjoyed seeing that. So one of the reasons I showed up, I mean, I'm all with the Earth Action Week, but one of the reasons I show up is also to learn about new things and new ways of teaching and learning. So I really appreciate all the great artwork that I saw. So it's just sort of like sparked all these things in my head. So one of the things I was curious about is that in terms of reception of this work and how that fits in within kind of like, you know, the kind of global art market, right? Because I think Taezoo, your work seems very conceptual, and that seems to be something that kind of fits really well. I appreciate that work. It reminds me a little bit of like a more interesting, a more up-to-date version of like Namjoon Paik's work, or Matthew McClaisland's work, where he used a lot of electrical. I mean, his, if you're walking into a construction site and seeing all these electrical things hanging from the ceiling, and then turning that into an artwork, right? So that kind of reminds me of that. So the question is, I guess, is for you, is that, do you worry about, and I always worry about this kind of aestheticization of this particular material, that that maybe the message that you're trying to get at around overuse, waste, and whatever, like this stuff around consumerism, which you mentioned quite a few times, kind of gets lost with the beauty, because it's quite beautiful what you're doing, especially with all the kind of like, the bells and whistles of the viewer activated machinery and things like that, which is really great. It's very kind of kind of like a panoramic approach to an environment, right? But I wonder if people kind of forget what your deep message is there, which I think is something that you express as the overconsumption.
Yeah, that is really good questions. And I, as an artist, whenever I show my work, people got into the context of the old machines, individual pieces, because they saw the machines in old generations' house and or their storage space, lots of place, and they got to know. I kind of remind we are living over this matter of questions. So, but we always forget it because our life is too busy. So as an artist, I keep showing it. And when I show it, there are too many perspectives on one object. And when they, if they are multiple, we feels like we are surrounded by what we made. And then some people are threatened by that kind of environment, but it's not threatening you actually, physically or mentally. But I wanna drag that questions and which we forgot and which we always ignore. So I don't know the answer, the perfect answer for that, because I'm not scientist, I'm not the researcher or governors, but I'm keep questioning as a one individual person who are living in this environment, we are going well or not. Yeah, that is my question whenever I show my work. And sometimes I think I'm not super pessimistic about the new technology, because the technology itself is just kind of a tool, but the way to use it can be make lots of side effect or bad result. Like we used to use these old technologies, but we love these old technologies because we can see television through this display, but it becomes like a security monitor when it changed the text context of the machine, then it becomes threatenous. So it's still there, just the same as original object, the functional object, but we put the meaning on it, and it sometimes threatens us or sometimes make us happy. So I want to find a new way to change the notion about this old objects. Yeah, is it good answer? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking more about the concept of transformation, right? Which art is always, I mean, great at doing it. You're kind of like re-seeing the world in a different way. Yeah, I mean, the question, you know, it's what I grapple with. It's not an easy question to answer. It's something that artists, designers grapple with all the time about, you know, the concept of beauty and how that relates to transformation, right? Because it's you know, we want it to be beautiful, but at the same time, it might have a message or multiple messages, and we always grapple that, you know, does it get lost, right? Maybe that's one of the casualties of art making. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I believe art need to be beautiful at the same time inspirational, and if it contains some social matters, it would be good good artworks, because yeah, I believe like that. So based on the idea, I'm keep making these artworks. I don't know what it is exactly, but I'm keep learning and testing based on the idea.
Are there any other questions? I have a question for you, Taezoo. Do you think, you know, with these sort of interactive, animated sort of pieces that you make, it almost seems like they might have a lifespan, even though they've been given a second life, that they're going to have a lifespan in terms of eventually the CRT tube is going to die or a transistor is going to fail. And do you ever think about creating them with their sort of end of life planned?
Yeah, actually, I'm working for maintaining Namjoonbaek, one of the Namjoonbaek's piece, because I'm also really into that question, and lots of museums start to think, talking about it, how we maintain the electronic-based artwork, especially Namjoonbaek's piece. It was really new technology 20 years ago, 40 years ago, but what I'm maintaining, the piece was born 1991, and it turns out like old technology based artwork, and we cannot find the replacement, or because lots of the machine, to make that CRT technology is very hard to keep because it's not trend anymore. So I'm kind of dealing that kind of a situation, even though I'm using these old technologies. Sometimes the potential collector, yeah, they always asking about when it not working, how you can let me use it, let me show display or something like that. But they are really concerning about when it's not working anymore as an artwork. So I put being, digital being, which can coexist in the internet at the same time in this machine. So I'm kind of the kind of metaphoric conceptual idea in my artwork, which Namjoonbaek couldn't think about it, or he might think about it when he leave, but he's mostly into stick on analog technology, but at the end of the later life, his life, he also considering how his artwork can be preserved and how his artwork can be live forever. So he just briefly mentioned, you can replace the display CRT2 LED, LCD, new technology. He just briefly mentioned. So based on that, yeah, the museum people communicate to each other how we preserve this artwork. But lots of people don't agree with that because it's not analog, it's not originality of the artwork. But I think as an artist of this side, I think the video, the data is originality, and the display, the television is kind of display the original video artwork. So I'm recently, anyway, yeah, the digital technology can give an answer for that, the preserving the artwork for entire of the life.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So
Eric, do you mind if I make a quick comment?
Oh, please do.
I was just thinking when Todd asked his question, this idea of allowing the viewer to have their own experience and not really jumping on the idea that they need to see it this specific way or that specific way, and almost accepting their viewpoint of whatever they're viewing. I had many conversations that seemed to be more productive when they didn't understand what I was doing. And they would look at it like, why would you do, who needs a broom for a leg? I mean, what's going on here? You know, and the idea that, you know, you create something and they miss the point might be okay because they have a different perspective on what's happening. And the impetus to ask the artist what's happening is really a lot of times the only way you're going to get the nitty gritty bits out of understanding Natalya's approach or Taezoo's approach. But they might actually really benefit from their own perspective. And if they can take the time to give it to the artist, it's sometimes really helpful for us, as the three of us, to like hear, what people are thinking, because it can really help. Anyway.
Thank you.
I have a question for Natalya.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, because I don't sew that much, but I do some sewing. And I was just thinking, what sewing machine do you use and what needles? Because I imagine plastic is really, really slippery and hard to, fix on your machine.
So actually, it's not too slippery. It sews pretty easily. I use a home machine. I have a Bernina machine. I also have an industrial machine, but it's not anything high tech. And I do use an interfacing underneath my plastics, and that makes it a little bit easier to sew with. But they're
Okay.
really not, I sew them even without the interfacing. It's not hard at all. They're not all that slippery.
Okay, because I would thought the needle like punches through and tears, but okay.
No, it doesn't tear. It does, once you make a hole in it, it's there to stay, but it doesn't tear usually.
Good. I'll have to try it out. Thank you.
Okay, please do.
Are there any other questions or comments? Do any of the presenters have any final words? Folks have been asking about where to get in contact with you three. So Natalya posted her website. Michael's putting his email address. Taezoo, if you can type your URL into the chat so people can follow your careers as you take off. I really appreciate all of you presenting. I appreciate everyone coming and joining us for Pratt Earth Action Week. This happens every fall and spring semester. We pull together these talks and presentations. They're very exciting, they're very inspirational, and it really activates the student body too, I think. I'm looking forward to having them in person again, hopefully in the fall, we'll see. But really, thank you so much. I'm super excited about this. It was really great, and it's such a diverse group of creatives, and I'm thankful to have been part of this. So thank you all.